A couple of bikers walked into a coastal diner looking for trouble. They found a highly decorated Navy commander instead. What happened next would expose a $100 million smuggling operation, topple a criminal empire, and teach the Steel Serpents motorcycle gang a brutal lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the quiet woman. Drinking coffee in the corner, they thought they were intimidating a lone woman. Instead, they picked a fight with one of the most decorated naval officers in American history. This is the story of how two bikers messed with the wrong female Navy commander and how their biggest mistake became their final one. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning fog rolled thick off the ocean, blanketing the streets of Port Haven. In a ghostly shroud, Commander Sarah Mitchell sat alone at her usual window booth in Mary's Harbor Diner, watching the steam rise from her coffee cup in lazy spirals. She'd chosen this small, coastal town precisely because nothing ever happened here. After 20 years of classified operations and missions that would never make the history books, all she wanted was quiet. Betty Murphy, that silver-haired owner who'd run the diner for over 3 decades, approached with a fresh pot of coffee. "You're too young to look so tired, dear," she said, topping off Sarah's cup. Her warm smile reminded Sarah of her mother, gone now 15 years. Betty had no idea about the nightmares that still woke Sarah in cold sweats, or why she always chose the booth with the clearest view of both exits. The peaceful morning shattered as two motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their engines deliberately loud enough to rattle the diner's windows. The other customers' tense conversations dying mid-sentence. Betty's smile faltered as she gripped the coffee pot tighter. Sarah watched the Steel Serpents' distinctive snake emblem on their leather jackets as they dismounted, noting how the other patrons suddenly found their breakfast extremely interesting. Jake Rattler Davidson, lead the way, his scared face twisting into what he probably thought was a charming smile as he surveyed the room. His Lieutenant Mike Crusher Peterson followed close behind, both men moving with the exaggerated confidence of bullies who'd never faced real resistance. Jake's gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment too long before turning to Betty. "Betty, sweetheart," Jake called out, his voice carrying an edge that made several patrons look away. "We missed you at the town meeting last night." Mayor Hayes was disappointed. Betty's hands trembled slightly as she sat down the coffee pot. "Had inventory to do, Jake. You know how it is." Sure, Jake replied, moving closer. "But see, when the mayor calls a meeting, it's not really optional. He's trying to help this town grow, and he needs everyone's support." His hand came down hard on the counter, making Betty flinch. Sarah watched the exchange silently, her coffee forgotten. She cataloged details with practiced precision. Mike carried a knife in his boot, poorly concealed. Jake's jacket bulged slightly on the left side, amateur mistake for a shoulder holster. Their confident postures suggested they were used to intimidation working, but their sloppy weapon discipline told her they'd never faced serious resistance. "Maybe," Betty said, her voice stronger now, "the mayor should focus on running the town instead of letting criminals dictate policy." The diner went dead silent. Jake's fake smile vanished. "What did you just say to me, old woman?" he growled, reaching across the counter. Sarah moved before conscious thought took over. 20 years of naval command experience kicked in as she grabbed Jake's wrist, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that made his fingers spasm open. "She said." Sarah spoke softly, but her voice carried throughout the silent diner, "that the mayor should do his job." Jake tried to pull away, but Sarah's grip was iron. Mike moved to flank her, but she remained focused on Jake. "Let go of me," Jake snarled, "or my boy here will make you regret it." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Will he? Because from where I'm standing, you've got 3 choices. 1, you and your friend leave now, and we forget this happened. 2, you try something stupid, and I send both of you to the emergency room. Or 3," she increased pressure slightly, making Jake win, "we find out just how many bones I can break before you hit the floor. You have no idea who you're messing with." Jake spat. "Actually, I do," Sarah replied. Jake Rattler Davidson, dishonorable discharge from the Navy. 18 you and the Steel Serpents have been running protection rackets up and down the coast, but lately you've moved up to something bigger. Did I miss anything? The color drained from Jake's face. Mike's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Sarah's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't. Your draw is slow, and you telegraph your intentions like an amateur by the time you clear leather. This will be over for a long moment. Nobody moved then. Jake raised his free hand in surrender. All right, we're leaving, but this isn't over. Sarah released him, stepping back to give them space to exit. It can be. That's up to you. The two bikers backed away, their attempts to look menacing undermined by the way Jake rubbed his wrist. As they mounted their bikes, Jake shot one last glare through the window. Who are you? You Betty whispered as the motorcycles roared away. Sarah sat back down, taking a sip of her now cold coffee. Just someone who's seen enough bullies for one lifetime. But as she watched the Steel Serpents disappear into the fog, she knew Jake was right about one thing. This wasn't over. She just painted a target on her back, and if her instincts were correct, the protection racket was just the tip of the iceberg. The Steel Serpents were part of something much bigger, something that reached far beyond the small coastal town. Betty placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of her, along with a slice of apple pie. Whatever happens next, the older woman said firmly. You're not alone. Sarah nodded, already running through scenarios in her mind. She'd chosen this town looking for peace, but sometimes peace had to be fought for, and if it was a fight the Steel Serpents wanted, they were about to learn why Navy commanders were the last people you wanted as enemies. No, Sarah agreed quietly, pulling out her phone to make a call she'd hoped never to make again. I'm not alone, and neither are you. Not anymore. Late that evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment above Murphy's Diner, cleaning her Glock 19 with practiced precision. The encounter with the Steel Serpents played over in her mind as she considered her next move. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It's open, Sheriff, she called out, not looking up from her work. Sheriff Tom Cooper stepped inside, his weathered face betraying concern. Word travels fast in a small town. Heard you had a run-in with Jake and his boys. News to me, Sarah replied, reassembling her weapon. I just had a friendly chat with some customers who were being impolite. Cooper sighed, settling into a chair across from her. Look, Commander Mitchell, Sarah, she corrected, I know about your background. When you moved here 6 months ago, I ran a check. 20 years in the Navy, multiple commendations, things so classified even my law enforcement clearance couldn't access them. Sarah finally looked up, meeting his gaze. Then you know I can handle myself. That's what worries me. The Steel Serpents aren't just some local gang anymore. They've got connections, deep ones. Last month my deputy found a shipment at the port that would have raised serious flags. Before we could investigate, orders came down from the state level to back off. Sounds like someone's being paid to look the other way. Cooper leaned forward, lowering his voice. Mayor Hayes holds meetings at the Steel Serpent clubhouse. Half the city council drives new cars they shouldn't be able to afford. The Port Authority suddenly has funding for extensive renovations. I've got a teenage daughter, Sarah. I can't risk so you turn a blind eye. Sarah finished for him. I do what I can without getting my people killed. Cooper stood, adjusting his belt. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Just be careful. Jake isn't the real power in the Steel Serpent. His boss, Marcus Cross, is coming to town next week. The man's got connections to smuggling operations across 3 continents. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her mind was racing. Cross was a name she'd heard before during her last mission with naval intelligence, an operation that had gone sideways, costing the lives of 2 of her teammates. Thanks for the warning, Sheriff. As Cooper reached the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Betty Murphy's a good woman. Been serving coffee and pie in this town since I was a kid. What you did today, well, it's about time someone stood up for her. After Cooper left, Sarah pulled out her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in months. Reynolds speaking. Mike, it's Mitchell. Remember that smuggling operation we tracked in Singapore? The one that got Johnson and Martinez killed. A pause. The one that got away? Yeah, think I found his supply chain. Port Haven of all places. Christ, Sarah, you're supposed to be retired. I need everything you can get me on Marcus Cross and the Steel Serpents MC official channels only. I don't want to burn any of your backdoor sources. Mike sighed. Give me 48 hours And Sarah, be careful, Cross isn't someone you want to tangle with alone. Who said I'm alone? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning, Sarah was helping Betty open the diner when a group of motorcycles roared past. Not Steel Serpents. This time their leather cuts displayed a different insignia. The Iron Wolves, their leader, a massive man known as Stone, caught Sarah's eye. As they passed, there was recognition there, and something else. A message. More trouble? Betty asked, her bow tired. Maybe not, Sarah replied. The Iron Wolves were different. Former military. Mostly they protected their territory, but didn't prey on civilians, and if Sarah's instincts were right, they might be potential allies. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mike. Data coming through. Cross, definitely your guy got coordinates for multiple port facilities. Also local intel suggests Iron Wolves MC might be enemy of your enemy. Sarah smiled. Things were falling into place. The morning crowd started filtering in. Regulars who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation. They nodded to Sarah with newfound respect. Word had spread someone had finally stood up to the Steel Serpents. Around noon, Deputy Sarah Martinez entered, making a beeline for Sarah's usual booth. Got something you need to see, she said quietly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Sarah reviewed the photos inside. Surveillance footage from the port. Steel Serpent members overseeing cargo containers being moved at night. Professional security teams that didn't match the gang's usual muscle. Documentation with very official stamps. When last night. And here's the thing, they're getting sloppy. Scared. Jake's got his people watching this place, watching you, but they're not being subtle about it. Sarah had noticed a Steel Serpent prospects had been parked across the street all morning, trying too hard to look casual. Your boss? No, you're showing me this. Sarah Martinez smiled grimly. Tom's a good man, but he scared me. I'm tired of watching these bastards destroy our town. Betty was there for me when my mom died, made sure I had hot meals and a place to do homework. I've got her back, same as you. Sarah studied the young deputy. There was steel in her spine, fire in her eyes. Another potential ally. Be careful, Sarah warned. If they realize you're helping me, I can handle myself, and I'm not the only one who's had enough. As if on key, the rumble of motorcycles approached again. The Iron Wolves were back this time, pulling into the diner's lot. Stone dismounted first, his massive frame filling the doorway. As he entered, his eyes scanned the room before settling on Sarah. Mind if we join you? He asked, his voice a growl. Rumble. Deputy Martinez tensed, but Sarah nodded. As Stone and three of his officers slid into the booth, Betty appeared with coffee, seemingly unfazed by the new arrivals. Heard you had words with Jake. Stone said after Betty left. Man's got a reputation for holding grudges. Is that why you're here, to warn me? Stone chuckled. No, man, we're here because the Steel Serpents are moving contraband through our territory without permission. Very great hardware, the kind that gets people killed. And he glanced at Martinez, who stood her ground. We thought you might be interested in a conversation about mutual interests. Sarah leaned back, studying the bikers. Their posture, the way they carried themselves, definitely military backgrounds, and unlike the Steel Serpents, they looked her in the eye with respect, not challenge. I'm listening. Stone glanced at Deputy Martinez again. Deputy Martinez stays, Sarah said firmly. She's part of this. Fair enough. Stone leaned forward. Cross is coming to oversee a major shipment, something big enough that Jake's got his people running scared. We've got intel, manpower, and motivation. What we need is someone who knows how to run an OP like this, someone with Navy training. You hear a lot. Small community military folks. Word gets around. Stone's voice softened slightly. I knew Johnson. He was a good man. The mention of her fallen teammate hung in the air. After a moment, Sarah spoke. If we do this, we do it my way, clean, precise, by the book. No cowboy stuff. Wouldn't have it any other way, Commander. As the Iron Wolves left, Martinez let out a breath. She'd been holding you sure about this? Sarah watched the bikers mount up through the window. The two Steel Serpents prospects across the street were frantically making phone calls. No, she admitted, but sometimes you have to work with the devil, you know, to take down the one you don't. The pieces were moving now. Cross was coming, bringing with him whatever operation had Jake so nervous. The Iron Wolves were on board and Martinez represented a potential link to legitimate law enforcement. Now all Sarah needed was a plan that wouldn't get everyone killed. Night had fallen over the small coastal town when Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Mike. She opened the file to find detailed satellite imagery of 3 locations around the port warehouses, registered to shell companies but clearly serving as Steel Serpent storage facilities. A knock at her door interrupted her analysis. Betty stood there looking nervous but determined. "You've got visitors," Betty whispered in the back alley. "They say they're friends of yours." Sarah grabbed her Glock, following Betty down the back stairs. In the shadowy alley, she found Stone and his sergeant at arms along with an unexpected figure, Sheriff Cooper. "We've got a problem," Cooper said without preamble. Cross isn't just coming for a routine inspection, he's moving his entire operation here permanently. "Why?" Sarah asked, though she was already piecing it together. Stone spoke. "Port Haven's perfect, remote-controlled local government, easy access to shipping lanes. But that's not the real reason." He handed Sarah a folder. "Our contacts spotted these guys arriving at the private airstrip outside town. The surveillance photos showed familiar faces, members of the same smuggling network Sarah had encountered in Singapore. The operation that had gone wrong. They're consolidating," Sarah muttered, "using the Steel Serpents as cover for a major distribution hub. It gets worse," Cooper added. "Mayor Hayes called an emergency council meeting tonight. They're voting to slash the police budget by 60%. I'll have to lay off half my deputies, including Martinez, clearing the board," Sarah concluded, "making sure there's no official resistance." Stone nodded grimly. "Cross arrives in 3 days. Jake's boys are already setting up additional security. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Sarah studied the photos again. "They'll be expecting trouble from law enforcement, maybe rival gangs, but they won't be looking for a naval intelligence operation." "Not exactly," Cooper corrected. "Not exactly." Stone smiled. "Half my crew are former Special Forces Rangers, Marine Recon, even a couple of Delta boys. We've kept it quiet, maintained our cover as just another MC, but we've got the training." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "A motorcycle club full of spec ops veterans. Someone's got to watch out for the little guy," Stone replied. "We've been tracking Cross for months, gathering intel, but we needed someone with your specific experience to put it all together." The back door opened, and Martinez stepped out, still in her deputy uniform. "We've got movement." 3 Steel Serpent trucks just left their compound, headed for the warehouse district. "They're moving things around," Sarah said, "consolidating their valuable assets where they can protect them better." She turned to Cooper. "Sheriff, I know you're trying to protect your people, but we're going to need some official cover for this." Cooper sighed heavily. "What did you have in mind?" "I need Martinez and any deputies you trust completely to do some selective enforcement, traffic stops, license checks, anything to slow down their movements and gather intel. They'll complain to Hayes," Cooper warned. "Let them, it'll make them sloppy, paranoid." She turned to Stone. "I need your people to start pressure testing their security. Nothing obvious, just enough to keep them looking in the wrong direction." Stone grinned. "Already started. My boys ran a few bikes past their checkpoints earlier, got them all spun up about potential rivals moving in. Good. They'll be expecting gang warfare. They won't be looking for a surgical strike." Sarah pulled out her phone, showing them Mike satellite imagery. "We've got 3 days to map their security, identify vulnerabilities, and set up for the main event." "And what exactly is the main event?" Martinez asked. "We're going to let Cross set up his operation exactly as planned. Let him bring in his international contacts, his whole network, and then—" Sarah smiled coldly. "We're going to take it all down at once, but we'll need one more piece of the puzzle," Cooper said. "What's that?" "Evidence," Cooper replied. "Enough to bypass Hayes and go straight to the feds. The kind of evidence that makes even corrupt politicians run for cover." Betty, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I might be able to help with that. The diner's been here for 40 years. Betty continued. "Everybody comes through here eventually. Even people who think they're too important to be seen in a place like this. And everybody talks." Sarah looked at the older woman with newfound respect. "You've been keeping track, names, dates, conversations. I may be just a diner owner, But I'm not stupid. I knew someday someone would need to know what really goes on in this town. Betty pulled a worn leather notebook from her apron pocket. 9 years of notes, everything from Hayes's first meeting with the Steel Serpents to which council members started living beyond their means. Stone let out a low whistle. Ma'am, you might just be the most dangerous person here. Meet back here tomorrow night. Sarah instructed Stone. Bring your best people. Sheriff will need everything Betty's collected plus whatever your deputies can legally gather. We've got one shot at this. As the group dispersed, Betty touched Sarah's arm. You're not just doing this for the town, are you? This is personal. Sarah thought of her fallen teammates, of the mission that had gone wrong. Sometimes personal motivation just means you'll work harder to get it right. Back in her apartment, Sarah spread out the intel, starting to form a plan. Cross had no idea he was walking into a trap. 3 years in the making. He thought he was expanding his empire, but he was really stepping into a sniper's crosshair. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Satellite shows more movement. Whatever they're planning, it's massive. Watch your 6. Sarah sent back a simple reply. Don't worry, this time we're ready for them. The next morning brought tense activity across town. Martinez and the remaining trusted deputies conducted strategic traffic stops on Steel Serpent vehicles, while Iron Wolves members made their presence known through carefully orchestrated drive-bys of gang territory. Sarah sat at her usual spot in Murphy's diner, watching Jake and 2 of his lieutenants arguing intensely across the street. Their frustration was visible even from a distance. Your coffee is getting cold, Betty said, sliding into the booth across from her. She placed her worn notebook on the table. Here's everything I've got on Hayes and his cronies. 10 years of notes, conversations, meetings that weren't supposed to happen. Sarah flipped through the pages, her expression hardening. Betty, this is more than just weapon smuggling. They've been laundering money through half the businesses in town. Why do you think I started keeping track? My herald, God rest his soul, always said knowledge was power when he passed, and they started pressuring me to sell the diner. I knew I needed insurance. A commotion outside drew their attention. Jake was shoving one of his own men against a wall, clearly enraged. The pressure was getting to them. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Stone. Packaged cured meat at the old cannery. I need to go. Sarah told Betty, stay alert, things are going to get tense before they get better. The abandoned cannery sat on the outskirts of town, its rusted equipment serving as silent sentinels. Sarah found Stone and his core team waiting inside, along with an unexpected guest. A bound and gagged Steel Serpent prospect found him snooping around our territory. Stone explained, figured he might have something interesting to share. Sarah approached the terrified prospect. She recognized him, one of the newer recruits, barely old enough to drink. What's your name, kid? Tommy, he stammered after Stone removed the gag. All right, Tommy, let's talk about the shipment coming in with Cross. Tommy's eyes widened. I don't know anything about Save It. Sarah cut him off. You're wearing a prospect cut, which means you do the grunt work, loading, unloading, keeping watch. You know things. The question is, are you willing to share those things, or do we have to get creative? The young man swallowed hard. They'll kill me, kid. Stone growled. What do you think they'll do when they find out you got caught on our turf? Tommy broke the words poured out. Shipping schedules, guard rotations, the layout of the compound. But it was his last piece of information that made Sarah's blood run cold. They've got some kind of list, he said. Names, locations. Cross is bringing it personally. Jake said it's worth more than all the weapons combined. Sarah and Stone exchange looks. A list like that could expose entire trafficking networks or reveal every corrupt official on Cross's payroll. One more thing, Tommy added, his voice shaking. They know someone's working against them. Jake called in extra muscle professional guys, not just bikers. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Martinez's problem. Hayes just suspended Cooper, named Jake's brother, as interim sheriff. Put him somewhere safe, Sarah told Stone, nodding toward Tommy. He might be useful later. Back at the diner, Sarah found Martinez waiting with Cooper and Betty. The former sheriff looked defeated. They're moving faster than we expected, Cooper said. Hayes called it a routine administrative review, but we all know what this means. They're consolidating power before Cross arrives. Martinez added, my badge probably won't be worth much by morning. Sarah considered their options with Cooper out and legitimate law enforcement Compromised, they'd lost their official cover. Her phone buzzed yet again. Mick. Satellite shows major movement, multiple vehicles converging on your location. Professional operators, not gang members. Watch yourself. As if on cue, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows rolled slowly past the diner. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore, Martinez muttered. They don't need to be, Sarah replied. They think they've got control of the town. That makes them confident. Confidence makes them sloppy. Betty watched the SUVs disappear around the corner. What do we do now? We changed the plan, Sarah said firmly. They're expecting resistance from law enforcement or rival gangs, so we give them exactly what they're watching for, while we hit them from a direction they'll never see coming. The Iron Wolves. Cooper asked part of it, but we've got another card to play. Sarah pulled out her phone, dialing. Mike, remember that favor you owe me? I need satellite coverage real time, and I need you to make some calls. It's time to wake up some old ghosts. As night fell over the town, more black SUVs arrived, professional mercenaries mixed with Steel Serpents members setting up checkpoints and patrol routes. They were preparing for war, but they were preparing for the wrong kind of fight. In the basement of Murphy's Diner, Sarah laid out the revised plan to her core team. The Iron Wolves would play their part, making noise and drawing attention. Martinez and Cooper would work their remaining law enforcement contacts. Betty's evidence would be their insurance policy, but the operation that would come from the shadows, executed by people who specialized in the impossible. Tomorrow, Sarah told them, Cross arrives with his precious list and his international contacts. He's expecting to find a town under his complete control. Instead, he's going to find out what happens when you underestimate the wrong people. Outside, thunder rolled across the bay. A storm was coming to Port Haven. By the time it was over, nothing would be the same. Sarah's phone lit up with a series of encrypted messages. The first was from Mike. Ghost team activated, 6 operators, all former teammates. They're yours if you want them. The second was from an unknown number. Commander Ghost lead here. Team is in position awaiting your orders. The third was from Stone. My people report Cross's advanced team doing recon. They're thorough, professional. These aren't regular muscles. Sarah gathered her team closer. Listen carefully what I'm about to tell you. Doesn't leave this room in about 6 hours. Cross and his people are going to execute what they think is a perfect takeover of this town. They have the numbers, the weapons, and the tactical advantage. What they don't have is the understanding of who they're really fighting. She spread out a detailed map of Port Haven. They're watching the streets, the obvious approaches. They've got eyes on law enforcement, on the Iron Wolves, on anyone they think might resist. But they're not watching the shadows, and that's where we're going to hurt them. The Ghost team, Martinez said quietly. They're real. Sarah nodded. 6 operators, all former special operations people who owe me favors, who know how to move without being seen. They've been in position since yesterday, mapping patrol routes, identifying vulnerabilities. Cooper studied the map. Even with them, we're still outnumbered. Number don't win fights, Sarah replied. Position, timing, and initiative do. Besides, we're not looking to win a straight fight. Betty spread out her notebook. I've marked every business they're using to launder money, every warehouse where they store contraband. If we hit them all at once, chaos. Stone finished. They won't know where to focus their response. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Mike, final satellite pass shows Cross's convoy is mobilizing multiple vehicles, heavy security, ETA 600. Perfect, Sarah said. That gives us 5 hours to get everything in place. Stone, get your people ready. Martinez, Cooper, coordinate with the Ghost team's recon. Betty, I know. The older woman smiled. Stay out of sight and let the professionals work. Actually, Sarah said, I need you to open the diner at the usual time. Act normal. Cross's people will be watching. If anything's different, they'll know something's wrong. Betty straightened her apron. Honey, I've been serving coffee to criminals for years while gathering evidence against them. I think I can handle one more morning. Thunder crashed outside as Sarah checked her weapons one final time. Remember, she told her team, we're not just defending, we're hunting. These people came to our home thinking we'd be easy prey. Let's show them what happens when predators become prey. The rain and intensified as enemy operators moved through the darkened streets. Their night vision equipment gave them confidence, but Sarah knew it would also be their weakness. They were looking through a digital green haze, While her people knew every shadow by heart, ghost lead status, Sarah whispered into her radio. First team moving into the kill zone, 20 operators moving in form in cells, heavy weapons, demo gear. Stone iron wolves in position, ready to create chaos. On your mark. Sarah watched through her scope as the enemy's lead element approached Murphy's diner. They moved well, covering angles, checking corners. Professional. Dangerous but predictable. Execute. Phase 2, she ordered. Across town, the iron wolves roared to life, their motorcycles thundering through the streets in what appeared to be a panicked evacuation. The enemy operators reacted exactly as trained, splitting their forces to investigate the new threat. Their divided. Ghost 2 reported second convoy moving to intercept the bikers. Martinez, now from her position at the old sheriff's office, Martinez triggered the prepared devices. Strategic transformers blew plunging new sections of town into darkness, while illuminating others. The enemy's night vision equipment suddenly became a liability as they dealt with rapidly changing light conditions. Multiple targets disoriented. Ghost 3 confirmed, moving to engage. The first shots were silent, suppressed weapons taking out key targets in the enemy's command structure. By the time they realized they were under attack, the Ghost team had already melted away to new positions. Commander Mike's voice came through her earpiece. Third convoy is holding back their commander. Smart. He's realized something's wrong. Good. Sarah replied, that's what the package is for. On cue, she transmitted a burst of encrypted data, the fake list from a location near the center of town. As predicted, the enemy electronic warfare team picked up the transmission. Their moving. Ghost lead reported all units converging on the transmission source. Sarah smiled grimly. Phase 3, all units execute at will. The storm above provided perfect cover as the real battle began. The iron wolves abandoned their decoy run, instead launching coordinated attacks on the enemy's vehicles. Ghost team operators picked off anyone who tried to call for backup or establish a command position, but it was the townspeople who proved most effective. Every door that looked like an escape route led to a prepared ambush. Every shadow concealed a defender who knew exactly where to shoot. The enemy operators found themselves fighting phantoms, never able to establish control or consolidate their forces. Commander Stone's voice was tight with controlled excitement. They're falling back to preset rally points. No. Sarah ordered. They're falling back to where we want them. The fake list data had led them straight into the town's old warehouse district, a maze of buildings rigged with motion sensors and prepared firing positions. As the enemy operators sought cover, they found themselves being herded into increasingly smaller spaces. Ghost team status: 15 targets eliminated, 20+ wounded. Rest are contained in the warehouse sector. Sarah switched channels. Mike, what's the third convoy doing? Finally moving in. Their commander must have realized his advanced teams are being decimated. Perfect. Martinez, initiate final sequence. The remaining street lights shut down completely, plunging the town into total darkness. The storm above intensified, rain hammering down as lightning split the sky. Through her thermal scope, Sarah watched the remaining enemy forces cluster together in the warehouses. Their training told them to consolidate to establish a defensive position. Instead, they were doing exactly what she planned, gathering in one location. All units be advised, Phase 4 is active. I say again, Phase 4 is weapons free. The remaining enemy operators never saw it coming. Ghost team snipers took out their leadership. Iron wolves cut off their escape routes, and the townspeople, led by Cooper and Martinez, maintained a constant barrage that kept them pinned down. But it was Sarah who delivered the final blow, moving through the rain like a shadow as she approached the main warehouse where the enemy commander had established his last position. The man who'd led the third convoy, the one who'd held back, thinking he was smarter than the rest. Time to show him just how wrong he was. All units hold position, she ordered. This one's personal lightning flashed again as Sarah moved toward the warehouse entrance. The real fight was about to begin. Lightning illuminated the warehouse interior as Sarah moved silently through the shadows. Her thermal scope revealed 6 heat signatures on the upper level. The enemy commander and his remaining elite team. Ghost lead, maintain overwatch, she whispered. No one leaves this building. Copy that, Commander. We've got You covered the warehouse floor was a maze of old machinery and storage crates. Perfect cover, but also perfect for ambush. Sarah could hear the enemy team communicating in whispers, their voices carrying a familiar cadence. Former special operations, she realized, Navy SEALs who'd gone mercenary. Commander Mike's voice came through her earpiece. Got an ID on their leader, Marcus Reaper Cross. He was in Singapore. Sarah's blood ran cold. Cross had been there the day her teammates died working for a different contractor. He disappeared before anyone could question his role in the operation's failure, so Cross's voice echoed through the warehouse. The famous Commander Mitchell. Been a long time since Singapore. Not long enough. Reaper, you know why we're here? Give us the list, and maybe some of these townspeople survive the night. Sarah moved between shadows, changing positions, still staying hidden, still hiding behind civilian casualties. Cross, just like Singapore. A burst of gunfire replied, rounds impacting where she'd been seconds before. These weren't random shots. Cross's team was trying to hurl her into a kill zone. Singapore was business. Cross called out, just like this. Is you really think your little town can stand against what's coming? Steel Serpents was just the beginning. Ghost team status on the other forces contained and neutralized. Iron Wolves are running cleanup. Only targets remaining are in your building. Hear that, Reaper? Sarah replied, your backup isn't coming. More gunfire, more controlled this time. They were getting frustrated, making mistakes. Two operators moved to flank her position, but Sarah was already gone. You don't get it, do you? Cross's voice was closer now. The Steel Serpent organization wasn't the head of the snake. We are. That list contains everything, every operation, every contract, every killer for Hive. With that data, we control it all. Wrong, Sarah replied, her voice echoing. You don't control anything, not anymore. She triggered the devices Martinez had planted earlier. Flashbangs detonated on the upper level, followed by smoke grenades. The enemy's night vision equipment became worse than useless as the warehouse filled with disorienting light and smoke. Ghost team external threats negative. Commander building is secure. No reinforcements approaching. Sarah moved upward, using the chaos to her advantage. The first operator never saw her coming. A quick strike to the throat, another to the temple. Silent, efficient. The second tried to radio for help but received only static. The town's radio jammers were still active, cutting off all communication. It's over, Reaper. Sarah called out, your men are dead or captured. Your operation is blown. Surrender now, like your team surrendered in Singapore. The taunt was meant to enrage her, make her sloppy. Instead, it brought perfect clarity through the smoke and strobing lights. Sarah moved like a ghost. The third and fourth operators fell to precise shots. The fifth managed to get off a burst of fire before Sarah's knife found his throat. Then it was just her and Cross. You know what your problem is, Mitchell. His voice was behind her now. You still think like a sailor, honor duty, protecting the innocent. The world doesn't work that way anymore. You're wrong. Sarah turned, facing him. That's exactly how it works. You just forgot. They moved simultaneously. Cross was good, one of the best. His strikes were precise, powerful, but Sarah had something he didn't, a reason to win that went beyond money or power. The fight was brutal and close. Bones cracked, blood flowed. Cross landed a crushing blow to her ribs, but Sarah absorbed it, countering with a strike that shattered his knee. Ghost team status. She managed between breaths, still clear, Commander. End this. As Cross stumbled, Sarah saw her opening the same move she'd used countless times in training, the one they taught every sailor. This is for Singapore, she said, and struck. Cross's eyes widened as he fell, his last words barely a whisper. You don't know what you've done. Sarah stood over him, breathing hard. Actually, I do. Mike uploading now. Sarah spoke into her radio, standing over Cross. Unconscious form, the real list downloaded from their servers while they were chasing our decoy. Every name, every operation currently being transmitted to every major intelligence agency worldwide. The storm outside was finally passing. Dawn breaking over Port Haven. Through her thermal scope, Sarah could see the rest of Cross's team being rounded up by the Ghost operators and Iron Wolves. The Steel Serpents, who hadn't fled, were surrendering, realizing their protection had evaporated. Commander Ghost Lead's voice crackled through her radio. We've secured the port facilities, found something interesting. Shipping manifests. Thank Records political payoffs goes way beyond weapon smuggling. Sarah moved to cure cross zip tying his hands. How deep state level, at least maybe higher cross. Wasn't lying about one thing, this was bigger than the Steel Serpents. Martinez's voice joined the channel. Sarah, we've got movement at City Hall. Hayes and half the council are trying to leave town. Cooper's team has them contained. Keep them there. The FBI will want to talk to them. Sarah, key her radio. Again, Stone status on the streets. Clean, my boys are running. Security with the remaining deputies. Town's locked down tight. No one in or out without us knowing. Sarah did one final sweep of the warehouse, gathering any intelligence they might have missed in Cross's jacket. She found a phone with contained. Keep them there. The FBI will want to talk to them. Sarah, key her radio. Again, Stone status on the streets. Clean, my boys are running. Security with the remaining deputies. Town's locked down tight. No one in or out without us knowing. Sarah did one final sweep of the warehouse, gathering any intelligence they might have missed in Cross's jacket. She found a phone with multiple encrypted channels and a small notebook filled with codes. More evidence for the federal authorities to unravel. Betty's voice came unexpectedly over the radio. They'd given her a spare unit to stay in contact. Honey, you might want to get back to the diner. We've got company hostile. Unless the FBI's gotten a lot more aggressive. Since I last checked, I'd say friendly. About a dozen agents in suits, looking very official. Their boss says she knows you. Rodriguez. Sarah smiled. Special Agent Rodriguez had been her contact during the Singapore operation. Tell her I'll be there in 10. And Betty put some coffee on. It's going to be a long morning. The scene at Murphy's Diner was almost surreal. FBI agents mingled with Iron Wolves members. Deputies chatted with ghost team operators who'd already changed into civilian clothes, and Betty moved through it all with pots of coffee and plates of her famous apple pie. Commander Mitchell Rodriguez greeted her with a professional nod, or should I say, the retired commander who somehow managed to expose a multinational criminal enterprise from a small town. Diner just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Rodriguez smiled. Right, and I suppose the highly trained operators who helped take down Cross's organization just happened to be passing through, or the fact that the Iron Wolves MC is actually a cover for former Special Forces operators. Stone, who just walked in, laughed. Ma'am, sometimes the best way to hide is in plain sight. Nobody looks twice at another motorcycle club. We've been tracking Cross for years. Rodriguez continued, spreading files across the counter. Could never get close enough. Then you show up, start trouble with a local gang, and within a week his entire operation falls apart. Want to explain that? Sarah accepted a cup of coffee from Betty. Sometimes bullies need to learn they picked the wrong target. The list you transmitted, it's already causing waves. Criminal networks worldwide are scrambling. Corrupted officials are resigning. We've got enough evidence to take down organizations we didn't even know existed. Cooper joined them, looking tired but satisfied. Hayes and the council are singing like canaries. Turns out they've been on Cross's payroll for years, helping him set up shell companies. Looking the other way while he built his operation, the Steel Serpents. Sarah asked. Most of the rank and file are in custody, Martinez reported. Jake and his inner circle tried to run, but the Iron Wolves intercepted them at the county line. They're feeling chatty too, especially after we showed